In the vast tapestry of our universe, patterns emerge that seem too perfect to be coincidental. When lightning strikes the same place twice, when you think of an old friend moments before they call, or when seemingly unrelated events align with mathematical precision, we often dismiss these occurrences as mere chance. Yet beneath these everyday anomalies lies a hidden mathematical framework that challenges our understanding of randomness, probability, and what we perceive as miraculous. Consider the case of Violet Jessop, who survived the sinking of both the Titanic in 1912 and its sister ship, the Britannic, in 1916. Most would call this astounding luck or divine intervention. But mathematicians and scientists see something else entirely. A fascinating interplay of probability, human perception, and the laws that govern our reality. Our story begins not with mathematical equations, but with the fundamental question that has perplexed philosophers, scientists, and everyday observers throughout history. When does coincidence become something more? The year was 1991, and Dr. Warren Adams was developing a statistical model for predicting cancer clusters when he noticed something peculiar in his data. Certain patterns kept appearing, patterns that, according to conventional probability theory, should not have been there. "I remember staring at those numbers for hours," he recalled years later. Something was happening that our standard models could not explain. What Dr. Adams had stumbled upon was the beginning of what would become a revolutionary understanding of how probability works in complex systems. His discovery would eventually connect seemingly disparate fields: quantum mechanics, evolutionary biology, cognitive science, and even the mathematics of financial markets. To appreciate the science behind coincidences, we must first understand how humans perceive patterns. Our brains evolved as pattern recognition machines. For our distant ancestors, detecting patterns meant survival, the ability to predict seasonal changes, animal migrations, and potential threats. We are hardwired to find order in chaos, meaning in randomness. In 2003, neuroscientist Dr. Samantha Breen conducted a landmark experiment at Stanford University that demonstrated this tendency. Participants were shown random sequences of dots on a screen and asked to identify patterns. Even when no patterns existed, participants consistently reported seeing them, a phenomenon known as apophenia. "The brain abhors randomness," Dr. Breen explained. "When presented with random data, it will work overtime to impose structure, even if that structure is entirely imagined. This tendency creates a perceptual paradox. True randomness often does not look random to the human mind. If you were to scatter 100 pennies randomly across a floor, they would likely form small clusters and empty spaces. To human perception, this appears non-random, yet it represents true statistical randomness. Conversely, if the pennies were evenly distributed, most people would perceive this as more random, when in fact such uniformity would be extraordinarily improbable by chance alone. Our misconceptions about randomness extend to coincidences. We tend to dramatically underestimate the probability of coincidental events because we fail to account for what statisticians call the problem of scope. In 1989, mathematician Percy Diaconis and physicist Frederick Mosteller formalized this concept in their paper methods for studying coincidences. They proposed what they called the law of truly large numbers. With a sample size large enough, any outrageous event becomes likely. Consider the birthday paradox. In a room of just 23 people, the probability that 2 people share a birthday exceeds 50%. This counterintuitive result demonstrates how quickly probabilities can escalate in systems with multiple possible matches. Now extend this principle to everyday life. Each day, we experience thousands of events and encounter hundreds of people, creating an astronomical number of opportunities for coincidences. When you suddenly think of an old classmate and then bump into them at a store, it seems miraculous. But when you consider all the people you could have thought about, all the people you might encounter, and all the places where encounters could occur, such events become mathematical inevitabilities rather than miracles. The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine, Biologist J.B.S. Haldane famously remarked, "This sentiment applies perfectly to the mathematics of coincidence. Take the case of identical twins separated at birth who lead remarkably similar lives. Marrying women with the same name, giving their children the same names, pursuing the same careers, even experiencing the same illnesses at the same ages. Such stories make headlines precisely because they seem to defy probability. Yet research by Dr. Thomas Bouchard at the University of Minnesota's Twin Studies Center has shown that genetics plays a far more powerful role in shaping our preferences, personalities, and life trajectories than previously thought. What appears to be an inexplicable coincidence may actually reflect the deterministic influence of shared genetic code, demonstrating that the line between coincidence and causation can be surprisingly blurry. But the mathematics of coincidence extends far beyond human experience, reaching into the fundamental fabric of our universe. The field of quantum mechanics offers perhaps the most profound example of how probability and coincidence operate at the subatomic level. In the famous double-slit experiment, first conducted by Thomas Young in 1801 but later refined to test quantum behavior, individual particles such as electrons seem to know when they are being observed, changing their behavior accordingly. When not observed, these particles appear to travel through both slits simultaneously, creating an interference pattern. When observed, they behave like discrete particles going through only one slit. Physicist Richard Feynman considered this experiment so fundamental to quantum mechanics that he said it contains the only mystery of the field. This quantum weirdness suggests that at the most fundamental level, our universe operates according to probability waves rather than deterministic certainty. The implications are staggering. Coincidences at the quantum level may not be coincidences at all, but rather manifestations of underlying probability fields that govern reality itself. As physicist Niels Bohr once stated, "Anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it." In 1957, physicist Hugh Everett proposed the many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, suggesting that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements occur in separate worlds or universes. In this framework, what we perceive as coincidences might actually be glimpses of alternative possibilities bleeding through the quantum fabric of reality. While the many-worlds interpretation remains controversial, recent experiments in quantum physics have demonstrated phenomena that would once have seemed miraculous. Quantum entanglement, which Einstein famously dismissed as spooky action at a distance, has now been repeatedly verified. Two entangled particles can instantly affect each other's states regardless of the distance separating them, appearing to communicate faster than light. A seeming impossibility that nonetheless forms the basis for emerging technologies like quantum computing. This quantum perspective invites us to reconsider what we mean by coincidence. If reality at its most fundamental level is probabilistic rather than deterministic, perhaps coincidences represent moments when these underlying probabilities align in ways that become visible to human perception. The cosmos itself presents us with what appears to be the greatest coincidence of all: the fine-tuning of physical constants that make life possible. The gravitational constant, the strong nuclear force, the mass of the electron. If any of these differed by even a tiny fraction, stars could not form, chemistry would not work, and life as we know it would be impossible. Physicist Brandon Carter formalized this observation in 1973 as the anthropic principle, which essentially states that we observe a universe capable of supporting life because only such a universe could contain observers. Some interpret this as evidence of design, others as a coincidence with an enormously low probability, and still others as evidence for the existence of a multiverse, countless universes with different physical constants, most incapable of supporting life. Cosmologist Alan Guth, who developed the theory of cosmic inflation in the early 1980s, suggests that our universe may be just one bubble in an eternally inflating multiverse. In such a scenario, what appears to be an improbable cosmic coincidence becomes an inevitability across the vastness of the multiverse. The concept of the multiverse has moved from speculative philosophy to serious scientific consideration, supported by mathematical models in string theory and eternal inflation. As physicist Brian Greene explains, if the multiverse really exists, then the historic mission of physics to explain all the properties of our universe in terms of fundamental laws, laws that dictate precisely how the universe behaves, would be forever dashed. Yet even without invoking parallel universes, our own cosmos demonstrates extraordinary mathematical consistencies that seem too perfect to be coincidental. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, denoted by the Greek letter phi, appears throughout nature, in the spiral patterns of galaxies, the arrangement of leaves around a stem, the structure of hurricanes, and even the proportions of the human body. In the 13th century, mathematician Leonardo Fibonacci described a sequence where each number is the sum of the two preceding ones, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. The ratio between consecutive Fibonacci numbers approaches the golden ratio as the sequence progresses. This same pattern appears in everything from the family tree of honeybees to the spiral arrangement of seeds in a sunflower head, which typically follow counts of 34 and 55, or 55 and 89, adjacent numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. Why would such specific mathematical patterns recur throughout nature? The answer lies in optimization principles. These patterns represent efficient solutions to common problems faced by natural systems, from distributing leaves to maximize sunlight to packing seeds in the minimum space. As physicist and mathematician Roger Penrose observed, there is a certain sense in which mathematics has a robustness to it. These mathematical structures are there whether we recognize them or not. What appears coincidental may actually reflect the universe's tendency to converge on optimal mathematical solutions. Evolution itself demonstrates this principle. Convergent evolution, the process by which unrelated species develop similar traits in response to similar environmental pressures, creates what appear to be extraordinary coincidences. The camera-like eyes of humans and octopuses, for example, evolved independently yet follow remarkably similar designs because they represent optimal solutions to the problem of vision. In 1980, paleontologist Simon Conway Morris began documenting numerous examples of convergent evolution, suggesting that the pathways available to evolution may be more constrained than previously thought. If evolution were replayed on another planet, Conway Morris argues, the results might be surprisingly similar to life on Earth, not because of coincidence, but because physical and mathematical laws constrain the possible forms that life can take. The emerging field of evolutionary developmental biology, or evo-devo, has revealed that seemingly complex evolutionary innovations often result from small changes to deeply conserved genetic regulatory systems. When developmental biologist Sean Carroll and his colleagues discovered that the same Hox genes control body patterning across vastly different animal groups, from fruit flies to humans, it became clear that what appeared to be coincidental similarities actually reflected common underlying genetic toolkits. These patterns extend to human systems as well. In 1949, linguist George Zipf observed that in any large corpus of text, the frequency of any word is inversely proportional to its rank in the frequency table. The most frequent word occurs approximately twice as often as the second most frequent word, 3 times as often as the third most frequent word, and so on. This pattern, known as Zipf's law, has since been found to apply not just to language but to city populations, income distributions, and internet traffic. Similarly, Benford's law, first noticed by astronomer Simon Newcomb in 1881 and later formalized by physicist Frank Benford in 1938, describes the frequency distribution of leading digits in many real-life numerical datasets. In collections of numbers from various sources, from street addresses to river lengths to accounting figures, the number 1 appears as the first digit about 30% of the time, while 9 appears less than 5% of the time. These mathematical regularities are so reliable that forensic accountants use Benford's law to detect financial fraud. When humans fabricate numbers, they typically distribute digits more uniformly than natural processes do, creating a detectable statistical fingerprint of manipulation. Such mathematical patterns reveal a profound truth. What we perceive as coincidences often reflect hidden order, mathematical principles operating beneath the surface of apparent randomness. But perhaps the most fascinating mathematical coincidences emerge from chaos theory, which demonstrates how deterministic systems can produce apparently random behavior. Mathematician Edward Lorenz discovered this principle accidentally in 1961 while running weather simulations. After rounding a variable from 0.506127 to 0.506, he found that his simulation produced dramatically different results, the foundation of what would become known as the butterfly effect. Lorenz's famous question, "Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas?" captures the essence of chaos theory. Small changes in initial conditions can produce vast differences in outcomes. Yet within chaotic systems, remarkable order emerges in the form of fractals, geometric patterns that repeat at different scales. The Mandelbrot set, discovered by mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot in 1980, represents perhaps the most famous example, an infinitely complex boundary generated by a surprisingly simple equation. Zoom in on any portion of the Mandelbrot set, and new patterns emerge that echo the larger structure, continuing infinitely in a property called self-similarity. This same property appears throughout nature. In the branching patterns of trees and blood vessels, the structure of coastlines, the formation of clouds, and the electrical activity of the human heart. What initially appears random reveals, upon closer examination, profound mathematical structure. As Mandelbrot himself observed, clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. Nature's apparent irregularity masks an underlying fractal geometry, a mathematics of roughness that produces patterns too complex to be described by traditional Euclidean geometry. The study of complex systems has revealed another surprising source of apparent coincidences: emergence. When simple entities interact according to basic rules, they can collectively produce complex behaviors that would be impossible to predict from studying the individual components alone. Craig Reynolds demonstrated this principle in 1986 with his Boyd's simulation, which showed that realistic flocking behavior could emerge from just 3 simple rules governing how individual birds respond to their neighbors. No central coordination is required. Complex patterns emerge spontaneously from local interactions. Similar principles apply to ant colonies, neural networks, financial markets, and human societies. What appears to be coincidental synchronization, thousands of fireflies blinking in unison, or applause in a concert hall spontaneously falling into rhythm, actually represents emergent behavior from systems following simple rules. In 2008, mathematician Stephen Strogatz documented numerous examples of spontaneous synchronization in his book, Sync, from the coordinated firing of cardiac pacemaker cells to the alignment of menstrual cycles among women living together. These phenomena result not from miraculous coordination but from the mathematical principles governing coupled oscillators. Even human consciousness, our sense of self and our perception of coincidences, may be an emergent property of the complex neural networks in our brains. As neuroscientist Christoph Koch suggests, consciousness may arise naturally when information processing systems reach a certain level of complexity and integration. This perspective offers a profound reframing of coincidence and miracle. What appears supernatural may simply reflect emergent properties of complex systems that our intuition has not evolved to understand naturally. The implications extend to social phenomena as well. In 2006, sociologist Duncan Watts demonstrated how information cascades through social networks, creating viral phenomena that seem to arise coincidentally, but actually follow mathematical principles of network theory. When certain threshold conditions are met, behaviors, ideas, and trends can spread explosively through a population, creating the impression of spontaneous collective behavior. Mathematician Stephen Strogatz and physicist Duncan Watts further showed that most complex networks, from social connections to the internet to neural networks, share a small world property, combining high local clustering with short average path lengths between any 2 nodes. This architecture, formalized in the 6 degrees of separation concept, explains why coincidental connections between seemingly unrelated people occur far more frequently than intuition would suggest. These insights have practical applications. In 2010, computational social scientist Nicholas Christakis used network analysis to demonstrate that targeting certain well-connected individuals for early vaccination during epidemics could dramatically reduce disease spread compared to random vaccination strategies. What seemed like coincidental disease clustering actually reflected hidden network structures. The mathematics of networks also helps explain another common type of apparent coincidence: simultaneous discovery. When multiple scientists independently arrive at the same breakthrough around the same time, as happened with calculus, Newton and Leibniz, evolution, Darwin and Wallace, and countless other discoveries, it often reflects not mystical synchronicity but the predictable outcome of knowledge networks reaching critical thresholds. As science historian Robert Merton noted in his study of multiple discoveries, the pattern of independent multiple discoveries in science is in principle the dominant pattern, rather than a subsidiary one. When the necessary theoretical foundations, experimental techniques, and social conditions align, discovery becomes not just possible but probable, and often inevitable. This network perspective illuminates why coincidences involving people, running into someone you were just thinking about, for instance, occur more frequently than pure chance would predict. Our social networks, geographical patterns, and shared interests create hidden connections that make such encounters far more likely than random probability would suggest. The statistical concept of clustering explains another common type of apparent coincidence: the perception that certain rare events happen in streaks or groups. When 3 plane crashes occur in a single month, or when a hospital experiences an unusual number of patient deaths in a short period, we perceive a suspicious pattern that demands explanation. However, statistical analysis shows that random processes naturally produce clusters. The mathematician William Feller demonstrated this with his waiting time paradox. If events occur randomly, the waiting times between them follow an exponential distribution, making clusters and long gaps not just possible but expected. This principle applies to everything from cancer clusters to lottery numbers to stock market movements. What appears to be a meaningful pattern often represents the natural clustering inherent in random processes, a mathematical certainty rather than a mysterious anomaly. Yet not all apparent coincidences can be explained away so easily. Some correlations defy simple statistical explanation, pointing to deeper connections that challenge our understanding of causality itself. Consider the work of physician Jonas Salk, who in the 1950s noticed correlations between seemingly unrelated medical conditions that eventually led to his development of the polio vaccine. Or the observations of epidemiologist John Snow, who in 1854 traced a London cholera outbreak to a single water pump on Broad Street by mapping the spatial distribution of cases, revealing a pattern that at first appeared coincidental but ultimately revealed the waterborne nature of the disease. More recently, in 2008, computational biologist Eric Schadt pioneered network approaches to disease that revealed surprising connections between seemingly unrelated conditions. By analyzing correlations across thousands of genetic, metabolic, and clinical variables, Schat's team discovered hidden links between diseases like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease that traditional medical approaches had missed. These examples highlight an important principle. Apparent coincidences sometimes reveal genuine causal relationships that were previously hidden from view. As statistician Edward Tufte observed, correlation is not causation, but it sure is a hint. The distinction between coincidence and causation becomes even blurrier in the realm of complex systems with feedback loops. Markets crash, ecosystems collapse, and civilizations fall not because of single causes, but because of complex interactions between multiple factors, creating what scientists call critical transitions or tipping points. Mathematician Martin Scheffer has shown that certain statistical patterns, increased variance, slower recovery from perturbations, and increased correlation between system components, often precede these critical transitions. What might appear to be a coincidental alignment of factors actually reflects the mathematical properties of systems approaching a tipping point. Climate science offers a striking example. The rapid warming of the Arctic, the acidification of oceans, the intensification of weather extremes. These phenomena might appear coincidentally simultaneous. Yet climate models reveal them to be interconnected consequences of increased greenhouse gas concentrations, following mathematical relationships established over a century ago by scientists like Svante Arrhenius, who in 1896 first calculated how carbon dioxide levels affect global temperature. The mathematics of complex systems also helps explain historical coincidences. Consider the simultaneous collapse of multiple ancient civilizations around 1177 BCE, a period historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse, when the Mycenaean kingdoms, the Hittite Empire, and several other Mediterranean civilizations fell within a short time span. Archaeological evidence and mathematical modeling suggest that these collapses, rather than representing an extraordinary coincidence, reflected the vulnerabilities of interconnected systems facing multiple stressors. Climate change, resource depletion, migration, and warfare created cascading failures across linked political entities. What appeared coincidental actually demonstrated the mathematical principle that highly optimized complex systems often develop hidden fragilities. These insights from complex systems theory suggest a profound reframing of coincidence. Perhaps many events we perceive as coincidental actually reflect causal relationships operating through networks and feedback loops too complex for our intuition to grasp. This perspective invites us to reconsider the very concept of miracle, etymologically derived from the Latin miraculum, meaning object of wonder. Throughout history, seemingly inexplicable events have been attributed to divine intervention. Spontaneous remissions of terminal illnesses, survivors of deadly accidents, precise alignments of astronomical bodies. Yet, as scientific understanding advances, the domain of the miraculous continues to shrink. Spontaneous remissions of cancer, once considered miraculous, are now understood to involve specific immunological mechanisms. Surviving lightning strikes depends on quantifiable physical factors. Even the precise solar eclipse visible from Earth, long considered evidence of divine design, results from the coincidental similarity in apparent size between the Sun and Moon, a temporary alignment in astronomical history that will eventually disappear as the Moon continues to drift away from Earth. Does this scientific perspective diminish the wonder of such events? Quite the contrary. It reveals deeper patterns that connect seemingly isolated phenomena, unveiling a universe more intricately structured and mathematically elegant than our ancestors could have imagined. As physicist Richard Feynman observed, the fact that there are rules at all to be checked is a kind of miracle. That it is possible to find a rule like the inverse square law of gravitation is some sort of miracle. It is not understood at all, but it leads to the possibility of prediction. That means it tells you what you would expect to happen in an experiment you have not yet done. The true miracle, from this perspective, lies not in violations of natural law but in the existence of natural laws themselves, mathematical patterns so precise and universal that they allow us to predict solar eclipses centuries in advance, to understand the quantum behavior of particles, and to recognize the golden ratio in everything from nautilus shells to spiral galaxies. This mathematical framework operates across scales, from the quantum to the cosmic. At the quantum level, physicist Eugene Wigner noted what he called the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences, the seemingly miraculous correspondence between abstract mathematical structures and physical reality. Why should mathematical equations, developed through pure reasoning, so perfectly describe the behavior of the physical world? This question, which Wigner called a wonderful gift which we neither understand nor deserve, points to a profound harmony between mathematics and reality that transcends coincidence. Einstein expressed similar wonder. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is comprehensible. The fact that human minds can grasp the mathematical patterns underlying physical reality, that we can understand everything from planetary motion to quantum entanglement through mathematical models, represents either an extraordinary coincidence or evidence of some deeper connection between mind and universe. Some scientists, like mathematical physicist Roger Penrose, have proposed that this connection might be fundamental rather than coincidental. In his theory of quantum consciousness, Penrose suggests that quantum processes in brain microtubules might connect human cognition to fundamental aspects of quantum reality, potentially explaining both consciousness and our ability to grasp abstract mathematics. While Penrose's specific theory remains controversial, the broader question he addresses, why mathematical patterns pervade both the external universe and human cognition, points to a profound mystery at the intersection of physics, mathematics, and consciousness. Theoretical physicist Max Tegmark has proposed an even more radical hypothesis, that physical reality is itself a mathematical structure. In his mathematical universe hypothesis, Tegmark suggests that the reason mathematics describes the universe so effectively is that the universe fundamentally is mathematics. From this perspective, what we perceive as physical reality represents just one of many possible mathematical structures, a view that dissolves the distinction between coincidence and necessity. These perspectives invite us to reconsider what we mean by both coincidence and miracle. Perhaps what we perceive as coincidental, the recurrence of the golden ratio throughout nature, the fine-tuning of physical constants, the emergence of consciousness from neural networks, actually reflects deeper mathematical principles operating across different domains. And perhaps what we perceive as miraculous, the existence of natural laws, the comprehensibility of the universe, the emergence of complex life from simple chemical processes, represents not violations of natural order but manifestations of a deeper order whose patterns we are only beginning to discern. This mathematical perspective does not diminish wonder, it amplifies it. To recognize that the spirals of a nautilus shell, the arrangement of sunflower seeds, and the structure of spiral galaxies all reflect the same mathematical pattern is to glimpse a profound unity underlying apparent diversity. To understand that quantum entanglement connects particles across space and time is to appreciate a universe more intricately interconnected than common sense suggests. The emerging science of complexity further expands this perspective by revealing how simple rules can generate infinite variety. Mathematician Stephen Wolfram demonstrated this principle through cellular automata, grid-based systems where cells evolve according to simple rules governing how they respond to their neighbors. Despite their simplicity, some of these rule sets generate patterns of astonishing complexity, including structures capable of universal computation. Wolfram's research suggests that much of the complexity we observe in nature might emerge from similarly simple underlying rules. If true, this would mean that the apparent coincidences and miraculous complexities of our world, from the patterns on seashells to the folding of proteins to the distribution of galaxies, might all be manifestations of a small set of fundamental principles. This perspective resonates with ancient philosophical traditions that have long sought unifying patterns beneath apparent diversity. When Pythagoras discovered that musical harmonies correspond to simple numerical ratios, or when ancient astronomers recognized mathematical regularities in planetary motions, they glimpsed the same underlying unity that modern science continues to unveil with ever greater precision. As we develop more sophisticated mathematical tools and gathering more comprehensive data, patterns that once seemed coincidental increasingly reveal themselves as manifestations of deeper principles. Network theory reveals connections between seemingly unrelated systems. Fractal mathematics describes patterns that recur across scales. Quantum physics unveils connections that transcend space and time. These discoveries suggest that coincidences often represent not improbable flukes but glimpses of hidden order, moments when the underlying mathematical fabric of reality becomes momentarily visible to human perception. And what of those coincidences that truly do defy mathematical explanation? Perhaps they represent not violations of natural law but indications that our understanding remains incomplete, signposts pointing toward deeper patterns we have yet to discern, mathematical relationships we have yet to formulate, connections we have yet to recognize. In this light, both coincidence and miracle invite the same response, wonder leading to deeper inquiry. The truly miraculous aspect of our universe may be not that it occasionally violates mathematical laws, but that it follows them with such precise consistency that we can use these patterns to navigate reality, From predicting planetary orbits to developing life-saving vaccines to exploring the quantum foundations of existence itself. As we continue to explore the mathematical underpinnings of reality, the line between coincidence and pattern, between miracle and natural law, continues to shift. What once seemed miraculous, lightning, eclipses, the complexity of living organisms, now reveals itself as the product of comprehensible processes following mathematical principles. Yet far from diminishing wonder, this understanding deepens it. The universe reveals itself not as a collection of random coincidences or arbitrary miracles, but as an intricately structured mathematical symphony whose patterns connect phenomena across scales, from quantum particles to living systems to cosmic structures. Perhaps the greatest miracle is precisely this, that we live in a universe governed by mathematical laws so precise that we can use them to predict eclipses centuries in advance, so elegant that the same patterns appear in nautilus shells and spiral galaxies, and so comprehensible that human minds can grasp these patterns and use them to understand reality itself. In the words of physicist Richard Feynman, the fact that there are patterns at all to be recognized is a kind of miracle. The true miracle is not the occasional violation of natural law that we might perceive as coincidence, but the existence of natural laws themselves, mathematical patterns so universal and precise that they connect phenomena across the vastness of cosmic scales and the depths of quantum reality. As we continue to explore these patterns, we may find that what appeared coincidental was actually connected, what seemed miraculous was actually mathematical, and what looked like chaos contained hidden order. The universe may be stranger than we imagine, but its strangeness follows patterns, mathematical principles that connect seemingly disparate phenomena into a coherent whole, revealing a reality more intricately structured, more mathematically elegant, and more profoundly interconnected than our ancestors could have dreamed.